Hi, fantasy football fans, listen up. You enjoyed fantasy football? You want to play in more than one league but have very little time to manage your roster? Well, this is a new format, a new way of playing fantasy football. It's called Best Ball, and it's my favorite new way to play on playdraft.com. Here's how it works. It's a season-long league with no roster management. Just draft and forget it. Once you're done drafting, there's no trades to worry about, no waiver wire, and best of all, you don't even need to worry about your week-to-week lineup. Perhaps you have Keenan Allen in your starting lineup in your regular redraft league, but he gets injured in the middle of the game while John Brown is scoring 2 touchdowns on your bench. Well, guess what? In best ball leagues, John Brown's points will be counted while Keenan Allen will be forgotten about. You don't even need to worry about setting your lineups from week to week, and your computer will give you the best score for you to dominate your league mates. Never worry about injuries again. You can draft a team anytime you want. League starts every couple of minutes, so you can join one right now. And the best part, play for cold hard cash. League starts from anywhere from $3 and up, so there's a league for everyone. No salary cap, play in a real life snake draft, just like you play with your friends in a season-long league. For a limited time only, all new players get a free entry into a $3 best ball draft when you make your first deposit. But you must use my promo code, FakePigskin. That's right, play for real money, game for free using my promo code FakePigskin on your first deposit. Draft, dominate, win free money. Just go to search draft in your mobile phone, whether it's your iOS or your Android. Go to playdraft.com and come play for free with my promo code FakePigskin.com. And now we will transition to our show. Good day, Dynasty Leaguers. Welcome back to another episode of A Dynasty Mind. My name is at FF Dynasty 101. This episode is presented to you by FakePigskin.com. You can find us on Twitter, FakePigskin, or on our website and on YouTube now. Dynasty Mind is a series that will help you devise and design and develop your way of approaching Dynasty, improving your process, and creating a long-lasting, successful team. So today we came just after the preseason week 3, and a lot has happened, and I can't imagine some of you might be feeling, whether you are the few unlucky ones where you lost Julian Edelman to ACL, or you lost Spencer Ware to a torn PCL, or you may just be one of the unlucky ones that has Cameron Meredith, who is potentially may have a PCL injury. I have the great fortune of owning both Spencer Ware and Cameron Meredith on my Scott Fishbowl team, so I'm on the really behind because Andrew Luck is also not expected to play in week 1. I am scrambling very hard, but thankfully none of these players aside from Andrew Luck were counted on to be the core of my team, but it might not be so lucky for some of you who have Spencer Ware or counting on Cameron Meredith to be your some of your weekly contributors. But no, don't fear. The best approach is to assess whether your league has replaceable talents you can find on the waiver wire, or perhaps it's time to explore a trade. The other thing here is then the fantasy world, and of course, no surprise, the dynasty world has really increased the value of Kareem Hunt, who is now slotted to be a feature bag, which is interesting because even when Jamal Charles went down last year, Andy Reid didn't come outright and say that Spencer Ware would be the featured guy. But for this year, after Spencer Ware went down, Andy Reid immediately came out and said that Kareem Hunt will be the feature back. So already we have some clarity for our rookie running backs. Kareem Hunt deservedly will see an increase in value, whether it's drafting or trading for him. But there are some that react to this news, and okay, perhaps the majority and reacted to this news in a strong manner, where now even Kareem Hunt has vaulted ahead of a lot of running backs in a draft, which I'm surprised about. Admittedly, I also had a moment of weakness, and that's okay for owners to admit that you have a moment of weakness. So my moment of weakness was that I actually considered trading Sammy Watkins straight up for Kareem Hunt. And I reached out to the wisdom of the crowd through Twitter. And seemingly, I am not the only one who has given this some thought, because both players are heading into an opposite direction, whereas Sammy Watkins is seeing a decline in his value due to situation and his quarterback specifically. Kareem Hunt is now slotted as the guy with lots of opportunity. But if we are to use a more dynasty-focused mindset, it might be still worth viewing Sammy Watkins as more value. Your league mates may disagree. I know a lot of fantasy football dynasty owners may disagree, but this is where we're looking at the landscape, and it's important because you need to understand where your league mates are, where they're getting their information from, and how they're getting their information, how is this being portrayed. And right now, Kareem Hunt might be better. I would say it would come to no surprise to me if Kareem Hunt is more will produce better than Leonard Fournette in 2017. But we have to go back to the scouting reports that a lot of analysts has written about, whether it's for fantasy, whether it's in reality. Kareem Hunt is not as talented as the top 4 running backs, but he has a golden opportunity, and we recognize that. With that said, don't go crazy and start offering future first for Kareem Hunt just because you want him. He's the new shiny new toy. We have to remember that while he is good and while his situation is ideal, Kansas City being a very run-heavy team, he is still a rookie, and we have to temper our expectations because I don't foresee him being a 1,200-yard rusher. There are other factors to consider, and you must look into how he fits with your team. Now, the only way, and this goes for across a dynasty kind of approach, the only way that I would give Kareem Hunt a first for Kareem Hunt is, does Kareem Hunt bump me up to a playoff contender? If my team looks good and I have every reason to believe that I was a playoff contender but just missing a few pieces that will vault me into a deep playoff run, then I would consider giving up my teams first. Needless to say, I am still a big fan of Barkley and Geis, Sun, and even Chubb, who I still all think are better than Hunt. We have to consider that Hunt may have to prove this year that he is the featured back, that he's worthy of a running back 1 caliber, and I think he has every opportunity to. Personally, I just don't see that to happen. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can consider when doing a trade. When it's not just a outright first for Kareem Hunt is an automatic no or is an automatic yes. You have to consider other contextual factors that fit with your league and with your team. So things that you need to think about to give yourself a little bit deeper advantage than your league mates who often most likely just play Dynasty without considering deeper context or just taking the advice they get from Twitter in a vacuum. Okay, so let's head on. Today's show will be very brief. We'll focus on the question of the week. Honestly, it's the only question that was given to me by Charlie Parker. I promise that I'll answer this one. He asked, will Chris regret fading Crowell so hard over the last 2 years by week 6 of 2017? Asking for a friend. Now, if for you those that don't know, I am definitely not a Crowell fan. And I'm not sure where Parker or Charlie gets this idea that I hated Crowell for the last 2 years. Last year, I was really big fan of Crowell. Charlie, I'm a fan of you too, but honestly, I'm a bigger fan of Crowell last year when he was being overlooked, when people don't consider him a real threat to be a running back one. That year, Crowell's cost was very affordable, and he has given up and given a solid year. This coming into this year, the narrative has switched. People are excited about the offensive line. People are excited that this team is making strides forward. They're willing to push Crowell up so far that he is a low-end running back one, which is far beyond the price that I'm willing to pay for Crowell. And I'm also not considering Crowell to be successful going forward. There are plenty of factors, and these factors is what I take into account when going through my dynasty process. One being that he is in a contract year, or he was at a contract year last year, and he played well. Even then, the Browns didn't consider him to be good enough to be extended. Instead, they gave him a second-round tender. So that's my first sign that maybe the Browns are still wanting him to prove it. Second of all, a player at this point in his career, over 4 years, I think Crowell has been in the league. His best season came last year, and in my dynasty process, I don't see him topping that. He might match what he has last year, but I don't really see how he can top it because Duke Johnson's still there. I have a sneaking suspicion that the Browns are still a year away from being a true noisemaker in the offensive side of football. So all these factors I've taken into consideration, and that is why I consider fading Crowell going forward. If you own him, my personal advice would be to trade him away. People said they've received the future first-round picks for Crowell. I personally haven't had that success, but if that's the case, I would trade him away without question. Now, if you are opposite of me, and I don't mind that, because there are other signs that point to that Crowell is definitely worth investing in, then be mindful that what you want to see him do next year and the year after that. Crowell's, if you look at his game log from last year, he was inconsistent and honestly never really truly strung together consecutive good games. We have some very, very much inconsistent games, and that is why this makes me kind of shy away from him. So that's kind of the idea of why I am not a fan of Crowell this year, and I will not regret fading Crowell. If he proves me wrong, I'm still not going to regret it, because looking into from a dynasty lens, I'd rather invest in a rookie, invest in a different type of running backs that are valued around Crowell's trade value at the moment. Okay, so on to the main segment today. I'd like to talk about the questions of what makes for an analyst, who are some of the top analysts and how do they view Dynasty. And I'm hoping to have some interview with some of the amazing people starting next year through this channel, through my Dynasty Mind channel. But I've posed these questions onto Twitter to reach out to them and see what are some of your favorite analysts in Dynasty. How do they think? How do they improve? One of the questions I posed to them is, what is one area of your process that you constantly work on despite being a fantasy football Dynasty player for so many years? I've reached out to several prominent names that you might recognize over the Twitter sphere, and I wanted to learn from them. And they graciously replied to me. So let's look at our favorite, Matt Harmon. He says his process that he continues to work on is letting go of his biases and to trust his own self-confidence less. This is important because people have do not recognize biases at times. They have it, but they don't own it. Okay, having bias is not a bad thing. Having biases means you're human, and that I would rather you recognize your biases and recognize that you have biases rather than denying that you have any biases. Any statistics, no, there's no such thing as objective statistics. And it's the way one interprets them, that's where bias creeps in. So even then, there's a bias. If you are fully committed to measurables, there's a bias there too, because you are isolating your thought process to just a certain process. That's a lot of word with process. But even then, bias does seep in because you have to interpret how those numbers make sense to you. And it's not always the case that these numbers are numbers never lie, because they do. I've asked Adam Harstead one of his areas that he likes to work on. And Adam is one of the sharpest philosophical mind of fantasy football dynasty owner. And he, of course, gives me a link to Wikipedia, the endowment effect, which in a psychologically and behavioral economics, the endowment effect is the hypothesis that people ascribe more value to things merely because they own them. And I've talked about this last week, where people have to, if you're doing a trade, you consider putting up a tax, a player tax. You're asking people to pay more for your player just for the simple fact that you own them, and you are expecting people to pay to value their players according to the market, which is a sharp inefficiency in the market. So this is another great one that you have to work on, to recognize that just because you own a player, don't overvalue them. And often that is a way to kill trades if you start forcing others to pay your player tax. For Matt Wallman, of course, evaluating talent, this is one of the sharpest mind in fantasy football and real football, who spends hours and days and months, years, year-round just to evaluate players. And even then, he continues to think that he needs to work on his process. So for you who are a dynasty owner who has just been dabbling in this dynasty thing for 3-4 years, you think that you are great with your evaluating talent, think again. Even a sharp mind like Matt Wallman is continually refining his process in evaluating talent to kind of challenge himself. So for those who are think that you are there, maybe you're just not there yet. You haven't. There's no there, in case you want to become overconfident in your own process. And for those who are haven't been in the dynasty world for too long, or who don't think that they have much to contribute, just think about this. Matt Wallman, who has been in this industry for a long time, longer than I have, longer than most of us even have lived, and he's seen more football than I can ever remember. He still continues to believe that evaluating talent is a process that needs to be refined. And if you are not confident yet, be sure to know that your favorite analyst also doesn't think that he's there yet and will continue to improve himself. Reached out to Doug Veach. He answered, going for my first instinct and not talking myself out of good decisions. A lot of times this happens when situation changes, when you question your first thought. And it happens every year when you have a little hindsight and looking, I used to have this player higher rank than this player, but because player Y was drafted by a certain team, he had camp buzz going on. Then you start reducing the importance of your initial evaluation. There is a time and place for that, but when you have a steady process, you gotta trust your first instinct. and go back to reevaluate when you should have acted on news, what is considered an overreaction, what is considered an underreaction. For Leo Pasiga, one of the strongest dynasty owners out there, his process, he concurs with Doug Veach, and he's this is a trend that I often see with a lesser experienced dynasty owner, is that they are not over that they would overlook the veteran players, that they're easy to dump the veteran players to look for youth and run it in a dynasty. I myself has been guilty of it, and perhaps this is not something to be taught. Perhaps experience is needed to kind of refine your process in this mindset, to understand what is worth, which youth is worth chasing, and which veteran is worth holding on to. Finally, Scott Fish. Yes, this is a process that traps a lot of owners, whether it's redraft or dynasty. You're thinking, oh, my roster is great in June, great in July and August, but once the season hits, injury hits, ineffectiveness hits, is your roster going to withstand the changes? Are you okay with holding on to your guys? It's interesting that he puts it in a way is not just to settle in and think my roster's good and stop making moves. Well, if your roster is good, then you would stop making moves. And if your roster is not up to par yet, you want to continue making moves. So he's presenting two different thought processes here, which is typical Scott. But I think he makes a good point that you don't overextend yourself, feeling that you need to make multiple moves just to show that you are a great fantasy dynasty owner. But you also need to make sensible, you need to make moves. You need to make sensible drops. You need to make sensible trades. And you need to have calculated behind it. Too often times I've seen owners just trade for the sake of trading, thinking that if they're winning each trade on paper, if they're very good at doing trading with others, that it's a marker of a good dynasty owner. That's not true. The DLF Ghost, he is one of the owners that I've played with that trades the least. Hard to kind of get him to engage him into trade talks, because he doesn't believe that trades need to be made until they actually do need to be made. So invest some time into just looking over the roster, looking into whether a trade is sensible, rather than being sucked in by your league mates. Not that you need to trade every time you log on into your chat room, that a trade needs to happen. It might just scare off owners. I mean, granted, myself, I've been visited certain chat rooms much less because people make me feel less for not trading enough. Stand your ground, trust in your process, trade when needed, and stay when you need to. Become a poker player. So that's it for today's episode. Honestly, I just wanted to go over some of the questions that I've asked around. I have an offer for any of my viewers. If you go to Fake Pigskin now, you know whether we are behind a paywall, and that is because we are heading into the NFL season, and we like for our premium writers, our expert writers, to give great advice, to also be paid, be recognized. I'm not one of those, but I recognize that we brought in a lot of talented writers who will give you the edge for this season, whether it's DFS, whether it's redraft, whether it's best ball. These writers have poured in so much work and their time and effort, and we wish to just reward them for their effort. Our subscription is $3.99 a month, or $39.99 for a whole year. So you basically get 2 months for free if you sign up, and you get access to all our contents. Now, I also like to talk about one of my article known as Digging Deep. This article can be yours for free. You don't need to pay access for it. As long as you help me promote my show, promote the Dynasty Mind, I will give you the link and you can access it anytime. What this article does is basically a collection of teams' depth chart, but it's fantasy football oriented. So you no longer do you have to look at each regular depth chart and figure out who's the next man up, who's even fantasy worthy. I've done all that work for you, and I will continually update this article. This article can be yours. You can have free access to it as long as you help me share this video. And you'll have access to this article all year long. I will continually update it when injury strikes, when I need to move players up. For example, we see here that in the Bears, Chicago Bears, who has recently lost Cam Meredith, you go to my article, you click Control F, search for Chicago Bears. If I can spell that. Okay, Chicago Bears, and we see immediately the people that you need to be looking at. I need to remove Kadeem Carey, but Victor Cruz, Tariq Cohen, with Cam Meredith out, we're looking at Kendall Wright, Josh Bellamy, even Tanner Gentry, who has chemistry with Mitchell Trubisky. And now I will have to move Kendall Wright up to the top of the waiver order for those who are in need of wide receivers in their deeper league. So that's kind of the advantage you have. You don't need to sort out which players might have fantasy value. I will do that work for you. So remember, share my video and I will give you a link. And that's it for today's video, actually. My 2 recommended follows on Twitterverse, which I think they need more followers because they're giving great advice for free, and they are honestly some of the best people to follow if you want to dominate in your league. I want to give a shout out to, let's see where he is. No, sorry. I had him in there. Okay. Yes, he is a eccentric follow. Hilal at HJ Chami. I don't know how to pronounce your name, buddy. But he is an eccentric follow. We don't see eye to eye most, if any time, because his recommendations are typically off the wall, but it's not without evidence that he tries to back up his players. For a moment, for some of the times, he is great to dig into players that everyone has forgotten about, everyone has downgraded. He recognizes that you need to hold on to certain players, including Amir Abdullah for him this year. I'm still not sold yet, but I recognize that Amir has perhaps a better role as long as he can stay healthy. But follow him. He's a great follow. He's funny. He'll share his deep insight, and it's just someone that it's good to have. If you're like me, you want someone to challenge your process, and if you're like him, then you will immensely enjoy his tweets every now and then. A second follow I would like to give is, of course, Nick Whalen. He is an awesome guy, an acquired taste to some, but for me, he is the writer and the guy who does the hard work that everyone does not even know where to start. He is the creator of the W Report. If you want to take your Dynasty ownership, Dynasty success to the next level, the Devi report is something that you need, and Nick is an amazing follow to bounce off ideas. And if you want to rub him the wrong way, just talk smack about his Chicago Bears. But no matter, he's the Corey Davis truther. He has, I trust his film more than I trust a lot of people. And he is really up there, top 3 for me, up there as far as film breakdown. All right, so those are my 2 recommended follow. I'm guessing he is a Cortland Sutton truther next year. So until next time, sharpen that dynasty mind, refine your process, create a success on your fantasy team. Peace out.